Hello mate and welcome. In this video we're going to continue building on what we did in the last lesson and look at how to take inputs from the character. Before I get started, a huge thank you to everybody for subscribing and hitting that notification icon. That really helps me out. So in the last video we left our scene with a floor plane and a ball, and when we hit the plus button or the play button you can see that our ball falls down to the ground and then just sits there fat, dumb and happy. It's being influenced by gravity, and our floor plane is an immovable object that just sits there and acts as a collider, which is fine. But what happens if we want to be able to receive input from the character to control the direction of the ball? This is where we need to add a script to our object. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new script. So in your assets folder, if you haven't done so already, right click and create a new folder, call it scripts or whatever you want to create it really, that's going to allow you to be able to put your script in it to keep yourself organized. The next thing that we need to do is actually import a package from the Unity registry that allows us to actually use the keyboard controls. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Window, Package Manager, and then the packages will take a few moments to load. And then once we're in there, filter, and make sure that you select Unity registry there, otherwise you'll get nothing the same as me. So there you go. And somewhere along in here you will see input system, select that and then simply click install. Now that we have that package installed, what we can do is we can start using it in our script. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on my scripts folder and I'm going to right click. Next I'm going to select create C# script, and then I'm going to call this gather inputs, all one word with a capital at the start of every word just to make it easy to identify, and then I'm going to hit return. And as you can see now, it's actually automatically created some code inside our file, but what we need to do is actually go into the file in our default text editor and adjust it. So we're going to double click on that, and after a while our file will load and then we will see some stuff on the screen. Now interestingly enough, this file is the default and it is a class. I'm just going to get rid of the update on close thing there. And what you can see is at the top three, these are packages which our code currently uses, and we actually need to add a new one to this one so that we can use our newly installed package. So what we're going to type is using Unity engine. Then you can move down there, hit full stop, and then we're going to type in input package or input system, and there you go. We now have access to that package and all it includes. So what you can actually see here is that our C# script has actually appeared as a class, and it's a class called gather inputs. So as you can see, using C# here, it is object-oriented programming. And we are using a public class, which means that it can be seen by other objects within Unity. If we were to type private there, it would be a private class and would only be used, the code in this file would only be usable within this file. What we also have is the name of the class is gather inputs, which means when we want to reference this class in another part of our code, we can type in gather inputs. And then mono behavior. Now mono behavior is a class that's included as part of Unity, and all this colon here means is that we're inheriting from this. And what that basically means is that labels like start and update and fixed update and various other types of label will be included and played in a specific order within the order of operations within Unity basically. So we've got our class, and what we want to do is first I'm going to get rid of this quoted out thing here. We don't need that. And I'm actually going to create a public integer like so. And I'm going to call this one direction. We'll call it direction X only because we want to maybe later on add a direction Y, we will see. And then we're going to set this to 0 because this is going to be a number that we multiply by something to add to the vector of the movement. Now that's probably a little bit wordy, but it'll all become apparent shortly. I'm going to add a space there as well so that we keep our code in some kind of order. Now what's going to happen is that when Unity creates this object, the first thing it's going to do is look for the start label, but that only runs once at the very start of the game, and we don't want this script to really do anything when it first loads. So what we can do is we can just get rid of that, and we can just tidy up our code a little bit more, and we can get rid of this line of code as well and just replace it with a space. There we go. Alrighty, so now we've got our update label. What we want to do is inside this, and this is something that runs once every frame in our game. That's useful to know. What we want it to do is we want it to check our keyboard to see if any keys have been pressed. I'm going to do that by typing in if, open brackets. We'll do that with an if statement. We're going to type in keyboard dot current dot D key, or whatever key you really want to check, but I'm going to check for the D key because it's ASWD. So we're going to type in D capital. There we go. As you can see, D key dot is pressed. If that's the case, then we want it to do something. So we're going to say direction X equals 1, positive 1. There we go. And then we're going to say else if, and then we're going to basically do the same thing again. We're going to type in keyboard current. Oh, we need to type in keyboard dot current dot A key dot is pressed direction X equals -1. And then we're just going to say else direction X equals 0. So we're giving ourselves 3 opportunities or 3 possibilities there. You're either pressing the A key to go left, the D key to go right, or no keys at all results in no movement whatsoever. Now remember to press Ctrl and F to save your script. And then that's that script basically ready to go. And if we go into Unity, and now we can select our ball, or we can in fact select any object whatsoever. We could put it on the main camera if we so chose, but I'm going to just pop it on the ball for the sake of popping it on there, and I'm going to drag it and leave it at the bottom there. And as you can see, our direction X currently reads 0. Now I can just press play on that, and if you hold down the A key, it's -1. If you hold the D key, it's +1, and if you let go, it's 0. So we know that that script is working, it's doing what it's meant to do, it's receiving our inputs, so we can now convert that input into some kind of movement on our ball. So now that we've got a script to gather input, what we need to do is create a new script which is going to allow us to move the ball in some way or other. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click and create another new script. And this one's going to be move ball, like so. And then we can hit enter, and then we can load that up in Visual Studio. And as you can see here, we have a class same as we did before. Now what we want to do is create some new variables which are going to allow us to do what we want it to do. The first thing I think what we need to do is create a new public integer, or no, let's go with a float actually. Let's do a float so that we can make it faster or slower. And we're going to call this one speed. Next thing we want to do is create an instance, or rather we want to reference our rigid body so that we can use the speed to apply physics to our rigid body. Remembering that the rigid body 2D component is the reason that our object is moving in the first place. So what we're going to say is private this time, and we're going to say rigid body 2D, and then we're just going to call it, let's just call it rigid, just for fun. And then we can close that off. And we also need to create, we need to reference our gathering input class. So what we say is private again, and we're going to say gather inputs, and we're going to call this one, I don't know, GI, just to be simple really. So there we go. So now we've instantiated, or rather we've referenced the rigid body, and we've referenced the gather inputs class. And what we need to do during the start is we need to tell the code, we need to tell our code which rigid body and which gather inputs class we are referencing. So what we're going to do is we're going to say rigid equals. Now we're going to do something called get component, and all get component does is it accesses one of the other components in the game object. So what we're going to say is get component, and then we're going to open square brackets, and we're going to say rigid body 2D, and then we can close off like so. I'll go back into Unity quickly to just clarify what I've just said. Because this code, this class, is going to be on the same object, the same game object as gather input and rigid body 2D, what we're telling our code is to reference this specific rigid body 2D and this specific gather inputs script or class. So we're calling for that and that. It's not going to pull the rigid body 2D from the square sprite because that isn't in the get components scope. We're going to reference these ones specifically. So now we want to just tell gi equals get component again, open bracket. This time it's going to be gather inputs like so. There we go. So now we've referenced those two classes, so we know what we're talking about when we're telling our code to look at these values. Okay, so now we're going to get rid of the update because we actually want to do the physics calculations more frequently than once per frame, and we're going to use fixed update, which is where Unity actually does its mathematics in terms of calculating physics. And we're going to make it private, and we're going to make it void because it doesn't return any information. And we're going to say fixed update like so. And then as you can see, when you press tab, it creates the class for you. So now all we need to do is say rigid, use the tab key to select that, dot velocity, and then we're going to create a new vector. And what we're going to say is new vector2, and we're going to put into our speed, and then we're going to say 0 on the y-axis. And in order to actually turn our speed into a controllable thing, what we need to actually do is multiply that by our gather inputs. So we can say gi dot, and then as you can see, direction x is the only variable we have accessible from there because it's the only public one. If we quickly go back to gather inputs, you can see the only value that we have there is direction x, and it's either going to be -1, +1, or 0. So if we multiply our speed by -1, it becomes the minus of whatever we tell the computer that our speed is. If we multiply it by +1, it's just going to stay the same. And then if we multiply it by 0, it's going to be 0. Remember to save your script again, and then we can go back into Unity. What we need to do is drag our move ball script into our game object, the same as we have done with our gather inputs. And as you can see, we have the speed value here, which is currently set to 0, which means that if we run our script, we're going to have 0 speed or 0 direction no matter what happens. So we actually need to change that, and I'm just going to give it a value of maybe like 4, an arbitrary number. And then if we press play, what we can see is that currently the ball's doing nothing. If I press my A and D keys, you can see that my direction X is changing, which is perfect, but we're falling incredibly slowly. And that's because our rigid body 2D is being told that the speed of direction is 0. So it's kind of fighting against itself a little bit there. But we can see now that our controls are working, and we have the ability to move our object to the left and to the right. What we can do to stop that weird drifting down is we can actually set gravity to 0. So let's do that. And then if we run our game again, what you'll see is that our ball will stay fixed in 3D space because it's no longer being affected by gravity, because gravity is now set to 0, but we are giving it a velocity. So what we can do is we can actually give ourselves up and down movement as well. If we come back into our move ball and our gather inputs, what we can actually do is we can copy this else statement like this else if, and we can apply that by adding again Control V and a Control V. Now let's say that we want the W key and we want the S key to be included. We need to create a new public int public int, and we're going to call this one direction y, and that's also going to equal 0. Remember to end our line with a semicolon. Okay, so if we have our key being W, we need to change this to direction Y. We need to also change this one to direction Y. And then what we need to do is we need to select this line, copy it, paste it, make sure that we're tabbed correctly. In fact, because we have two statements here, we now need to add an extra curly braces in there because we've got two commands being carried out, and then we need to set direction Y there. And we can save that script. So now we're receiving the inputs to change the direction Y variable. What we now need to do is add that to this object here, and what we're going to say is that the direction along the Y-axis is also going to be speed, but this time we're going to multiply it by gi dot direction Y. And then if we save that, we can come back into our script like so, give Unity a moment to update itself, and then if we hit the plus button, we can now control our object in the vertical plane. Now I've made a bit of a boo-boo there, can you tell? Because I'm pressing the W and S buttons and it's moving down in both situations. So let's have a look at our gather inputs there. And what you can see is I've got -1 for both of my statements there. So I need to remove that minus symbol from there and then come back into my code. I'm going to stop the replay and then I'm going to start it again. So now I have the ability to move it on all four planes, up, down, left and right, just by pressing the A, S, W and D keys. And if I select the circle object in my hierarchy and I watch the directions X and Y, you can see that my keyboard inputs are being registered there, and it's just multiplying the speed by the direction in the X and Y. And because there's no gravity affecting our object, it's just going to go wherever we tell it to. That about wraps it up for this video, guys. I hope you found that useful. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video. But until then, you take damn good care of yourselves, alright? Bye bye.